Hey, math friends, welcome to our very last week of our book study. I cannot believe it is the last week. We are going to be talking about chapters 6 and 7. So make sure you say hello in the comments. Let us know where you are watching from. Let us know, drop an emoji. Let us know how you felt about this book study. I know that I've really enjoyed it. And today I am joined with Rachel from Rise Over Run. If you are like an OG mix and math teacher, then or you've been in the community for a while, you will know that Rachel and I have been doing these book chats together since, goodness, at least 2019. We actually talked about productive struggle together online in 2019. So you'll have to let me know in the comments if you remember that. But Rachel, I would love for you to just introduce yourself for anyone who is joining us who does not know who you are.
I'm Rachel, and excuse me, like Brittany said, I'm kind of known as Rise Over Run if you're on Instagram. But yeah, I've taught middle and high school math and have been a math coach. I just love what Brittany talks about. Even though we teach different grade levels, I think we just love chatting about how students learn and just how to be better educators.
Yeah, it's so funny. Anytime somebody's like, I'm a fifth grade teacher, but now I'm going to sixth or seventh grade next year, like, who should I follow? I'm like, Rachel. Like, that's always my go to. Send them to you.
Same to you. I'm sending them to you.
Yes. Okay. And before we even get started, I absolutely love your background. That is so cute. Can you just like show it to us?
Here
It
we go.
is,
The
yeah,
struggle is real, but I added some words. The struggle is when real learning happens.
I love that. That is like the cutest thing ever. And if you are somebody who's like going all in on productive struggle next year, I will definitely drop a link to that in the comments because it is so cute. I love it. So, all right, we are going to dive in to our book chat tonight. I would love for you to take a moment to just drop your biggest aha moment, your biggest takeaway in the comments. Just so we can see what is really standing out to you. I know for me, looking at these last two chapters, they were really kind of broken up into a few different sections. So we have like students' reflection on struggle, and then teachers' reflection on struggle, and then obviously just closing it out with, just celebrating productive struggle in the classroom. But starting with student reflection on struggle, this actually was really interesting to me. I hadn't really thought about like, yes, there are we have so much time for reflection or well, yeah, just reflection at the end of a lesson. I hadn't necessarily thought about having students specifically reflect on struggle itself. Like that's not something I mean, like we would have conversations about it, but not an intentional planning of putting this reflection in my lessons. I don't know if that's something that you did or if that stood out to you as well.
That same thing. I feel like I provided opportunities for productive struggle, maybe not to the extent that I learned about in this book, but I don't think I provided much reflection at all. Like I kind of
Yeah.
thought if I give them opportunities, then that's what they'll learn through it and they'll figure out that, this is good for them. But a lot of students still were fighting against that struggle. So I think reflection probably was a missing key part that I needed to do more of. To help students really think on what did you just go through and why could that be a good thing that you didn't know the answer right away? What can we learn from that?
Yeah. And so I think this is kind of like a very common theme that we're going to talk about quite a bit tonight. And noticed this theme all throughout the last two chapters. But on page 150, they say incorporating opportunities to reflect on struggle consistently reinforces that it is valued and plays an important role in learning mathematics. And so I hadn't even necessarily thought about the fact that a lot of times we will have those reflections about the content, and it's obviously showing students that we like do value, that content that we're giving up class time to reflect on it, but to provide a reflection specifically on struggle that communicates that this is something that is really something that we value. So I love that. And I love all of the different activities that they gave for like reflecting on struggle in the lesson. So
It
was there
reminded
one?
me.
Oh,
I
go
was
ahead.
going to say what you just said. When I read it, I thought of the quote, "Evaluate what you value." I think that's from
Mm-hmm.
building thinking classrooms. But same idea is that I used to just only look for content, but meanwhile we're saying we value struggle, we value mathematical practices, we value all these things that we never reflect or
Mm-hmm.
we never kind of take tabs on, then what does that really say? And not that you have to grade struggle, but to reflect on, did you struggle today? That's showing that you value it. So I think I highlighted that same thing you just read, that we have
Yeah. And
to look on it.
yeah, I love that. Absolutely love that connection because, yes, even though it's not necessarily that we are evaluating it, well, okay, evaluate doesn't have to mean grade.
Right.
Like, I guess I don't know what the actual definition of evaluate is, but I'm guessing it's like looking at something and really like analyzing, like, how did this go? How did the student do? So, to some extent, that reflection maybe is evaluation. Maybe dictionary.com would disagree with me. Maybe I don't know the exact definition of evaluate, but yes, I love that connection. And I think by, pointing students to reflecting on that, it does communicate that value. So I absolutely love that. Okay. So was there a student activity that really stood out to you? Either one that maybe you've done or one that you just really enjoyed that you're like, oh, I love this.
There were several. I'm looking for that chart on 160. The
Okay.
effort, we've got didn't get it to got it, and then we've also got tried hard or should have tried harder. It's the grid.
Mm-hmm.
I love that because I was thinking, how often do we just think about got it or didn't get it? And if all the students got it, we think, oh, awesome lesson, let's move on. But in reality, what if they all got it and it was super simple? Is that really a good lesson? So
Yeah.
I thought, where on this chart do I even want students? Of course, I want them to try hard and get it. But
Mm-hmm.
what are the other spots that are okay? And I would say that the tried hard but didn't quite get it, that's not terrible. That's not a terrible
Yeah.
lesson. Meanwhile, the got it but didn't try hard, that's really not that great of a lesson either. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. It really made me think about where are kids on this thing?
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting. I was trying to think through, I think that this would definitely have to be modified based on the grade level. Because I was trying to think, like, okay, a third grader, how would they do? I would need to test this out.
Yeah.
I was like, how would they do with like looking at this and figuring out like where they are, within the quadrant? But I think that it's still a really great discussion to have. Like, I think you can take the same principle and whether it does end up in like a journal reflection or the doodling, like still have that, like, okay, where were you at? Like, how hard did you have to try or how hard did you try? And then did you get it? So I really enjoyed that. I also really liked the picture of struggle as well. It actually reminded me. So there is this thing. Have you ever heard of the blob tree?
I don't think so.
Okay, so I had never heard of it either. And then Nicole on Team Mix and Math, she brought it out for one of our like virtual math experiences that we did. And it is, if you just Google it, you can download it for free. It's just a PDF and it has all of these like little blob figures on a tree. And some of them are like hanging from the tree. Some people, one of them is like on the ground face down, others like cheering on the tree. Like it's just all these different representations of like all these different feelings. It is so cute. I love it. So if you just Google it, you'll find it. But I think that might even be like a really good picture because it has all these different emotions for students to then, or the way that she has done it with her students is she'll put it up and she'll say like, which of these blobs like represents like how you feel. I mean, you can ask any question, but like how you feel about this learning experience or how you feel about this lesson. And I was just thinking about how we could use that picture in a way with the picture of struggle and some of the questions that are asked there to represent like which one of those represents how you felt about this. So I really love that. I mean, I love using even the pictures that are in here, any range of pictures, but I thought the blob tree, I was like, oh, this is perfect for this.
I'm gonna have to look that up. But yeah, I like the pictures too. I like that you could even have students bring in a picture or find a picture of, I don't know, it just seems something different than if we always ask them to write about it, that, oh, I'm just picking a picture and then we're going to discuss it. That's not intimidating. And
Yeah, it
get some,
definitely,
go ahead.
yeah, it can be really, I think, overwhelming to some students, especially maybe in like lower grades when it's like, okay, write about this and reflect on this and journal on this, especially when they're still growing their writing skills. That's not to say like not to write and not to have those journal opportunities, but I did like in the book that they were like, okay, this is a time where grammar and sentence structure and all of that, like we're not focusing in on that. We really just want them to reflect and get it out. And I think there was something in there. I think maybe it was the one word one where it was talking about that being really friendly for like our multilingual learners. And even just thinking about, how can they, I think it was Georgina Rivera, where I had an interview with her about multilingual learners, and she was talking about like letting them do certain things in their home language, or also using like Google Translate to provide opportunities for them to, experience math in their home language. And so even just thinking about taking some of these practices and using tools like ChatGPT or Google Translate or something to help them communicate their ideas and reflect on it. That's where I really like how some of these activities can be modified in that way to
Yes.
meet, students where they're at.
I love that. Yeah. But there were so
Uh,
many. I like that they gave, and you don't have to like pick the same thing. I think there is something to having something new. It's not like, oh, we're gonna reflect again. It's it's a little bit fresh every time we do a little reflection. It's not always the same thing, and you might get
yeah.
some different feedback each time.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I think where I definitely missed out on not having the intentional reflection of productive struggle is I think on page 155 it says it's important for us to know when their frustration is not directly related to a math struggle. And it talked about how so many things can contribute to the frustration. And now being a parent, I feel like I am a pro at trying to detect, okay, what is causing this meltdown right now? Like, where is the frustration coming from? To recognize that our students are entire human beings who come in with a lot of feelings and a lot of things happening, that the frustration may not be directly related to the math. And we don't know that unless we have these opportunities to give them voice, give them an opportunity to reflect and communicate where that frustration is coming from. Because it could be something completely out of math class, and it could also be something that's happening in math class that isn't necessarily the content. So I think that was just like, that was a big light bulb moment for me of, oh, like this is why this is so important.
I love that. Yeah. And they bring so many emotions about math. I mean, I think as math teachers, we already know that it's not always just about what lesson we have chosen. Not only are there outside factors, there's also just the complicated relationship that kids have with math already. And
Mm-hmm.
I do think some of these reflection activities would help us to understand what students are thinking and try to work through that.
Yeah, we've talked quite a bit throughout this book study about how um, math identity plays such a huge role in how students show up, what they get from math class. And so, yeah, I think this is just even more reason why these types of activities are important. And I do like that in like the question answer section near the end of chapter 6, because I was even thinking too, I was like, okay, how often would I
Yeah.
include these types of activities in the classroom? And they did say it was like once a week or once every other week. So it's not something that we're doing on a daily basis, but it is kind of like a pulse check or a temperature check of, you know, where are students with their relationship with struggle? How are they feeling? What's going well for them? Where are they stuck? Where's their mindset at when it comes to struggle? So I really appreciated that they gave some guidelines there. Although I'm sure there's no right or wrong. It's always nice, especially when this is something that you're newly doing, to have
Yeah.
some guidance as far as like, okay, where should I start with this?
Right. I was going to say I also liked the simple Goldilocks reflection. I mean, that could be something quick, but I like how they pointed out what does it mean to have to be just right. So you could choose too easy, too
Mm-hmm.
hard, or just right. And I put a star by the just right because it even says my answer might have been wrong, which is just
Uh-huh.
like that's probably a crazy idea that that's a just right lesson. I got it wrong. And yes, it's okay because you were thinking, you were working through that. You were actually learning something along the way. So the answer,
Mm-hmm.
again, we're not just focused on that answer um, as are you good at this? Did you have a good day? That's the answer is a tiny little piece of that.
Yeah. I actually took note of that as well. The too hard, too easy, just right. I really, really liked that. Um, because I think it would have been easy to go into having like a too hard, too right or too hard, too easy, or just right. Like prompt, but not actually having the conversation with students around what makes it too easy, what makes it too hard and just right, and bringing students into that discussion. I think I've done something equivalent to this, but we didn't necessarily, I think it was maybe like with emojis. A lot of times we'll have like the smiley face or like the whatever, the even face or the sad face or whatever. But I think there's so much power in having conversation around just because it's hard doesn't mean that it's a not right problem or that it's a too hard problem. And just because it's easy doesn't mean that it's a just right problem. What does it actually look like for something to be just right? So I loved that. And there was actually something else I was going to say about that. I lost it. I had it in my notes, but I don't remember. Oh, well, it must not have been super important.
I was skipping around. Sorry, I probably threw off your notes.
Oh, okay. I remembered now what I was going to say. So we do a lot of problems with number choices. So if you have read any of the CGI books, actually that could not be true. I don't know if they do this in all of the CGI books. I can't remember, but I know for a fact they do. And when I say CGI, I mean cognitively guided instruction. There is a fraction and decimals book, and in there they have essentially numberless word problems, and they give students like number choices. And I've done this with my students. We actually created a whole set of problems with like number choices for our teachers. And essentially what it is students pick a set of numbers that is just right for them. And a lot of times, like students don't necessarily pick the one that's just right for them. Like sometimes it's a little bit easier, then they move up to the next set and all of that. They progressively get more challenging. But I even thought about how this could pair with that and looking at like, how do we find those numbers that are just right for us? Like, is it going to push us to like use a strategy that we may not have used or use a model that we may not have used before? So I loved even like, I was even kind of thinking about like, how do we take this reflection idea and also have these discussions around the content side of things as well?
I love that. Yeah, because if students know they're going to need to reflect, then that might change which numbers they pick. That you're not supposed to just pick the ones that you can get right. That's not the point. And I think a lot of teachers now will do where they give students choices of the mild, spicy, what are
mild, medium, spicy, or mild, medium, hot.
Or hot, yeah. And
maybe, I don't know. I forget.
Yeah, it made me think of that too, that you're not just picking the one you think you can get correct. Well, I don't think that's what you should be picking. But if we communicate that to students, that you're supposed to be picking the one that will push you. And I think that ties right into what is too hard, too easy, or just right. So yeah, I agree. That's a good connection. And I think it would all help students. All of this would help them then pick the next day and then reflect. And then it all ties back in.
Yeah, I feel like you're making so many building thinking classrooms connections, which is awesome. No, it's great because I actually had somebody message me right before we even started the book study. And she said, I just finished reading this book. I was a little overzealous, but there are so many connections to building thinking classrooms. I think these two books like go hand in hand. And I totally agree. And really, when you think, go ahead.
I was going to say this one, because I was trying to think because they're different books, of course. This one is almost like helping you get the right mindset as the teacher going in, where I think building classrooms gives you more of, here are some steps to take, here are some real changes. But I've thought about like how some teachers have tried building thinking classrooms and they're like, this just isn't working. And I wonder, is it the actual practices that aren't working, or is it the expectation of what it's supposed to look like?
Yeah.
Like if you're not ready as a teacher for what productive struggle looks like, you might think that a thinking classroom is not going well. And not nothing against like it may not go well in certain classrooms, but I think we have to have a certain mindset of what we're expecting. And that's where I think these books work well together to kind of give a full picture of what does it mean to learn? What does it mean to think? What are we really doing here?
Yeah, that is such a great point. And I feel like this is like a really good foundation or starting place, because when you do create a really positive relationship, like as a teacher with productive struggle, then the practices in building thinking classroom don't necessarily feel as intimidating. It was either I of the interview with John or Kevin, I can't remember which one, but we specifically talked about the need to let go. And when we were dealing with productive struggle, like we have to let them struggle. We can't handhold all the way through. And I think that was that's something that's really challenging about if you're brand new to the idea of struggle and building thinking classrooms and all of that. Like that can be the really challenging part, is letting go, not directing every single move that a student does. And so, yes, I think this book is very much like prepping, or just creating a comfortableness with the idea of struggle in the classroom, and then which is the exact foundation needed for building thinking classrooms. So I love that.
It is. Yeah.
Okay, so after was there anything else that really stood out to you in the student reflection side?
I think we hit the ones that I highlighted the most. As I was reading, I think this is where you're going, but as I was reading the ways for students to reflect, I was thinking, oh, I should reflect. I should do these.
Yep, exactly. So there is a section, goodness, it was page 167, where it's right in the middle of the page. It says, engaging in your own reflections during the time you ask students to reflect is not only an excellent time management strategy, but as noted elsewhere in the chapter, it is a powerful signal to your students that reflecting on behavior, experiences, and feelings related to a lesson or task is something you value. And it's like, once again, same theme of letting our actions communicate what we value, letting our actions align with the words that we say we value. So we say we value reflection by showing students that we are also reflecting. So I love that they pointed that out. And yeah, they had some great ideas as far as how to reflect as a teacher. I know for me, the one that I have done, and just that I love doing, is the in the moment notes. I always kept like a clipboard. I think I've shared about this on one of the YouTube videos, but I always had a clipboard and it had every student's name. And then it had like 3 columns. And I'd often take note of like the strategy that they're using, or even just like what their like body language was communicating about how they were feeling about it, like just any type of observational notes. So I know that was one that was really powerful for me. Was there one that you were like, oh, I've done this, or maybe I should try this?
The one I thought like related and similar to that, I would keep a clipboard with like where their seats were and make notes. And I remember one time I was like, okay, for a week, I'm going to make notes specifically about positive things. Like I didn't want it to always be like, oh, talking. But so I was like, I'm going to write down like when I see a student. And so hopefully by the end of the week or so, I would have something positive. And I quickly made these little reports and like gave them to the students. Like, look, I saw you doing this.
Oh, I
And
love that.
they were like so excited. Like they were like, can I take this home to my mom? And I'm
Aww.
like, yeah. So, but I thought, okay, what if I made notes on productive struggle? Like that would reinforce what I'm seeing, that, okay, you were working through it. You were trying, you were using strategies. So that I thought, okay, that's similar. And I think that would go a long way as a way to recognize students. And I don't know about with older students, because it did say like calling students out. Sometimes they don't want to be called out for,
Yeah.
like, that's, I don't want you to recognize me. I don't want to be a teacher's pet. But that's a way to recognize them. And it's not embarrassing in any way.
Yeah.
They're peers.
Okay, that is awesome. That is taking like my little clipboard strategy that I used like to a new level, because I was really like, my reflections on my clipboard and my observations were very much for me to, figure out who I wanted to meet with in a small group, who I wanted to provide additional support to, or, just where, kind of getting a gauge of like where everybody was at so that I could adjust instructionally from that. But I love that idea of taking notes about the positive things with the intention of that making it beyond the clipboard essentially, and being something that you provide students. Like, hey, on Tuesday, like you demonstrated this. I am so proud of you. Like this is exactly, what we want in the classroom. This is exactly what mathematicians do. I love that. And giving them that little like note, or I just love that. And I will say, as a parent, so my Jeremiah, my oldest, his PE teacher will send home, I don't even know what they are, but they're little half sheets of paper that's like, I caught you doing great work. And he just signs it. And it means so much to both of us. So I imagine that this personalized note, that's not just like a note that's like, hey, you did great work, or you were the star student this week or whatever, but it's very specific to what you saw them do. That is so cool. I absolutely love that.
I think so. When I did it, I didn't think like they would care that much, but, and like you're saying now as a parent, those little things do matter. Like you do want
Mm-hmm.
to see, even if it's something little that they did, you just want to know that someone took note.
Yeah.
So I can see that being
Well,
powerful.
and it allows them to have a really powerful conversation at home with their parents, especially when you see that your child is being praised for struggle. Like,
Yes.
why is my child being praised for struggle? And then they get to have that conversation at home. So I think that's really powerful, and it extends beyond just being really meaningful for students, but helps kind of reframe what math looks like for parents at home who aren't necessarily involved in what's happening in the classroom.
That's a good point because I've thought through this book too. What are parents going to think when they hear we're struggling?
Yeah.
Because it is a hard mindset to change for parents who you don't get to speak to about what you're going to do. I mean, you go in and you could talk to your students every day, but you don't get to have those conversations with the parents about why math class might be a little different than what they expect.
Yeah. And I do like that this book has pointed out, at least in the beginning, pointed out quite a bit how struggle, like being able to face struggle or face challenging things and struggle through them and persevere, like how that is a life skill. And so, hopefully parents can get on board with that, because
Yeah.
we see it. Like, I don't know how many times I have conversations with my boys about like, I know it's hard, but like you can do it. Keep trying. It's okay if you don't get it right the first time. We have these conversations already. And I think now it's just recognizing that math is a great place to be developing these skills. Um, so I just think anytime we can bridge that conversation or bring that conversation into the home as well is just so powerful. Okay, so I was on the fence, not on the fence, but I had feelings about, or maybe like wonderings about how to celebrate productive struggle. I definitely believe it should be celebrated. Um, but like I think like gifting for it felt different than like highlighting, if that makes sense.
Yes, I think I had the same, like, although I'm always kind of iffy about rewards. I don't know. I'm always like, not that they're all bad, but it seems like they often go off in a direction that we didn't mean, or they turn into some kind of bribe, or I don't know. I was doing some research. I was in a class and I was researching homework and
Uh-huh.
how when we say things like, if you finish your homework, you can go play. And that kind of language makes homework negative. So
Uh-huh.
I don't know. It's made me rethink anything I offer a reward for. Am I saying that this is bad? And so I have to give you something good, if that makes sense. And I know that's not what they meant, but sometimes
Yeah.
it goes in that direction. So I also would like, okay, I got to be careful how I would say that I'm celebrating with, I don't know. I just don't know if I'd attach a reward to it.
Yeah, and so that's what's so interesting. I think there's a difference between celebrating and rewarding. And I definitely don't think that like the I don't think the authors said anything wrong
No.
whatsoever. I think it was maybe like how I was receiving it. And I was
Yes.
like, I feel much, for some reason, it sat better with me to celebrate versus reward.
Yes.
Um, but I think ultimately the point of this, and the point that the authors were wanting to communicate, was we should be celebrating, we should be rewarding, we should be praising the thing that we value, which
Yeah.
is struggle. So, but I will say I did highlight for some, I can't figure out what it is. It's like the struggle bucks I didn't personally love, but then right below that, the shout outs I absolutely
Yeah.
loved.
Love
And
that
so I
too.
can't figure out what the difference is. I guess it's a difference of like celebrating and rewarding.
Maybe like if we've had certain experiences with how bucks are used, maybe that's what we're bringing into this.
Yes. Yes, this is
So,
our feelings. It's not the author. We are bringing some emotional baggage to this conversation.
yeah, because yeah, there's nothing I saw wrong with it, but I think it's like how we've maybe seen bucks used before, or yeah, I agree. I thought the shout outs were great, especially like if students were recognizing each other or um, yeah, I thought let's celebrate the reward is that you learned something, you struggled and you persevered. Like that's the reward.
Well, okay, so a couple of thoughts that came up. If I forget, remind me to come back to the someone, what was it? It was like someone else reflection.
Okay.
Um, but hopefully I won't forget. I think that where the reward makes sense is if we are rewarding other things in the class already. So, like, say we're using like a point system or something like that in the class
Yes.
already, then like we probably should be rewarding struggle because we're already using points or bucks or whatever else for the positive behaviors that we value. So I think
Right.
if you're already using those things, then rewarding the productive struggle should be in that.
Yes.
I think maybe my emotional baggage is coming from the place of like, I don't personally and love the like points system or anything like that. So I think I was like looking at it from a lens of like adding points into the classroom to highlight productive struggle. That's very different than if you already have that point system
Yes.
um,
And I
like
think
in place.
some schools have a
Mhm.
school-wide, and then you might
Yes.
earn a school-wide reward. So yes, I could see, okay, let's count these toward that because that's what we value in this room,
Mhm.
but that's how you'll get your points here. I can see that.
Yeah. So I think it totally depends on what you already have set up in your classroom. But no, the thing that I was going to say, because I think you said something that made me think of it. But we didn't necessarily talk about as a student reflecting. Of there is a reflection thing in here that it was like I think it was called somebody else or
Yes.
someone. What was it? Let me find it. Oh, find someone. And I think it was like finding
Mhm.
someone who shows these different behaviors of productive struggle. And something you said made me think, I was like, what would it look like to allow like students to celebrate other students for productive
Mhm.
struggle, and really lift them up? That's I don't think that's something that they mentioned in here, but like say you've got like the the bucks system going on or the point system already going on, what would it look like for students to have a couple points that they can gift to somebody in their group who really modeled productive struggle. So that way they're highlighting each other. And obviously, there's probably a whole lot of other factors you would need to consider there as far as, just relationships, not being clicky or anything like that. But I do think it might be really valuable to have a discussion and really do, I think, highlighting or praising those students and allowing students to praise other students for, I saw this person struggle and they really persevered and they contributed so much to our group, despite the fact that there was that struggle initially. So,
I love that
um,
idea.
yeah, I thought
Yeah,
that
we
might
did
be
skip
really cool.
over. We skipped over the find someone, but that was a good one too. And I like that
Hmm.
connection. Yeah, because anytime they can start seeing, I think again, we always put the value on being fast, but anytime we could switch that up in math to we're not just looking for the person who knew it, or we're looking for the person who was able to work through this and did all these things in this list, persevere, added value, helped someone, participated. Those are all things that if we can have students recognizing other students, even better.
Yeah. I think I heard this quote once. It was, I'm probably going to butcher it, but I think it was like what gets rewarded gets repeated. Is that what it
Yeah,
is? Or what
that's a
gets praised gets repeated or something like that. And I know we just had this whole struggle over rewards versus celebration, but what gets celebrated gets repeated. And so if we are celebrating students for the struggle, I do believe that kind of like signals in their brain that it's like, this is something I want to, model. I want to do again. I think most people are just naturally wanting to please. And so, knowing that this is what we value, hopefully students will then want to do more of it. So I will say one of the things that I really appreciated that they mentioned, it kind of like brought it back. I felt like chapter 6 and 7 was like bringing everything full circle. But on page 172, the author said, knowing your students' identities and building a healthy classroom community, it says help avoid the challenge. It was talking about some of the challenges with the celebration. But I think it just goes back to knowing your students and celebrating them in a way that kind of like aligns with what you know about them. And every student might be each student may want to be celebrated differently. Like we have some students who absolutely would not want to be praised in front of the whole class. And we have others who that would really build their confidence and mean a lot to them. So I just appreciated that they went back to that of like, know your students and trust yourself and make decisions accordingly. So I
Exactly.
hope that was good.
Like you said, it may depend on the grade level or even the individual students. And knowing your students is going to be the main thing, to know what's going to motivate them, what they're going to appreciate, or what's going to embarrass them. All of that, all those factors come into play.
Yeah, absolutely. So closing out chapter 6, then when it looked at like the key takeaways, our theme that we've talked about all night, our actions signal to students what we value. And I had this conversation, I think it may have been with Kevin, just, sharing the story of it's easy when we are like pressed for time or we're rushing or it's the end of the year to kind of fall back on the teaching practices that maybe are somewhat ingrained in us from our own experiences. And so I can say that I value struggle. I can say that speed is not the goal. And then at the end of the class period, when we're rushing and the bell's about to ring and we're like, okay, you got it. Yes. Okay. Moving on to the next problem. Okay. You got it. Moving on. And it's like, oh, wait, but our actions there just communicated that speed was enough. Like speed was enough for us to move on. And it wasn't about the thinking. So again, I love that they just emphasized this. I think it's a constant challenge for us as teachers. And I say this also as a parent. It's a constant challenge for me as a parent to not fall into just how I was parented, but let my actions align with what I'm telling, my 7-year-old. So,
Right.
um,
It's tough.
so
It's
yeah,
tough because you can be like, yes, this book's wonderful, but it's tough to put it into place in a classroom and not fall back on what you're just used to doing or what we think, oh, I got to get to the next lesson. I mean, there was even the reminder about when you do reflections, it may not be the end of that task. They may not have finished, but that's okay. And instead of rushing the last 5 minutes to get to an answer, maybe we just say, hold up, let's reflect and come back tomorrow, because the answer is not the key thing here.
exactly. Yeah. And you even mentioned, just how challenging this can be to, if you are very much in a space where there's no struggle in your classroom, like maybe your mindset has been like, we want to make this as easy as possible for students. Like we care about our students. We want them to get the answers. We want them to feel successful. Like if you are in that place and productive struggle feels a little scary, there is going to be an adjustment period, and it's going to feel scary at first to, implement some of the things from this book. But I really appreciated that the authors, I don't know how many times I can say, like, I really appreciated the authors, but I did, they're great. But I did like the fact that the authors pointed out that it's unrealistic to think, okay, I'm going to go into next school year and implement every single thing that was covered in the book. I've heard this before. I remember Robert Kaplinski saying this to me. But about the fact that we should be changing like 10% of our teaching practice every year. Like it's overwhelming and ineffective to go in and say, okay, 75% of the things that I'm going to do, like I'm going to completely change it. So I like that they said that this is, what do they say? It's incremental changes, incremental improvement rather than completely changing everything. And I think that provides just a really accessible and goal going into the school year. It feels much better. It feels less overwhelming for
Mhm.
anyone who may be like, this is the very beginning of your journey of productive struggle.
I agree. And that reading that, I was like, oh, only 10%? But it makes sense. You can't just throw out everything you've ever done to try something brand new. You can't do that. It's not going to work. You're going to be burnt out and overwhelmed, and no one's going to be happy. But yeah, if you 10% sounds doable. 10% change, whether that's we're going to start with an identity activity or we're going to try to do a task each week and look for productive struggle, or I'm going to start reflecting more. I think that helps with you can be anywhere along in your productive struggle journey. Like you could
Hmm.
be just starting and you can make some small changes, or you may feel like, oh, I already do a lot of this, but what's a little thing you could add to it to make it even more powerful for your students?
Yeah. And I really enjoyed when I was talking to Kevin, who is one of the authors of the book. He said, I am still learning about productive struggle. And I think the author said that at the very end. And it's just a good reminder that there's no like, I've arrived. Like,
Right.
there's not really like a finish line. There's not a finish line for productive struggle. We are all in different places with how where we feel about it, how we where we're at and being able to support students. And so it's just this constant goal of growth. There's not some finish line to be at. And so to hear that even the authors who've obviously done all of this work that has been their focus, they've had such great collaboration, are still learning about it. I think that gives us permission to still be learners with productive struggle as well.
Right. I mean, it goes right back into what productive struggle. If productive struggle has gotten easy for you, then maybe you need to try something to challenge yourself.
Exactly. There you go. So I would love to hear from all of you. Comment and let us know. So there are 6 different actions. So first one is just valuing productive struggle. Second action is fostering an identity for productive struggle. So really looking at students' identity. Building a community for productive struggle. Planning for productive struggle. So what does it look like to plan a lesson? And then supporting struggle during the lesson. And the last one is reflection. So I would love to hear which of those 6 actions is kind of like your goal action to maybe prioritize or start with next school year. So let us know in the comments. Was there any one of those 6 that just really stood out to you throughout this book study?
I think I have all of them I could improve, but I think reflection was the one I was probably missing the most. That would
Mm-hmm.
probably be the area that I had kind of ignored. Um, but still, with any of them, with all the chapters, I was taken away like, oh, that's a good tip. That's a good tip. And I loved the examples of the like, here are 2 teachers, and reading what they did, neither one seemed bad. Like, I think
Mm-hmm.
most people would read it and be like, that sounds like a great lesson. But that just goes to show that it's not just about the task, it's not just about the activity that they've chosen. It goes into how the teacher interacts and how they respond to what students do. And I think part of that is you probably can't just read a book and be ready to go. That's going to take practice with seeing how students react to things. But yeah, I think all of those are they're things that I learned about each of the strategies along the way.
Yeah. I really liked, I mean, I can't copy what you said, but I really also would have said like chapter 6, the reflection. But I will also point out, so the reflection one definitely is one where I had a ton of aha moments. I think that was a big gap for me and not reflecting enough specifically on productive struggle. But the other thing that really stands out to me from this book study is I was having a conversation with somebody the other day about the fact that I feel like students' identity in math is not, um, is kind of like undervalued, like how important student identity is. And
Mhm.
so there's a section in this book that really stood out to me because I would say I did a great job in having discussions around identity in math and really building students' identity in math and exploring students' identity in math in the beginning of the year. And I don't think I intentionally checked in enough on how their identity was evolving. I think I very much like set the foundation. And I do believe that I did things that would continue to promote like a positive identity in math. But I didn't have it goes back to like the reflection piece. Like, yes, we would talk about productive struggle, but was I intentionally putting in activities for them to reflect? Not so much. And was I intentionally putting in all throughout the year opportunities for students to reflect on their identity and for me to get a better like peek at where their identity was beyond just what I'm observing? Because I think we can sometimes miss things. Like observation is a very powerful like assessment tool. But we don't always know exactly what's going on in their brain. And so that was another section that I just picked out of. I loved the activities of just so many activities of how we could get students to reflect on their identity, communicate with us where they were at in their beliefs about themselves as doers of math. So I really enjoyed that part as well.
I'd agree with that too. Not to copy what you said, but beginning of the year, you're all about like, yes, let's do these things identity I've learned about. We're gonna do all these things at the beginning of the year that are new, and then it kind of fizzles, or you don't go back to it. And I agree. Another thing on that same note, I don't feel like I asked students enough about. I didn't ask them. I just observed and thought that I knew how they felt about math. And a class I was taking recently, I needed to reach out to a former student, and I reached out to a student who was a very good math student and asked her some questions, and she said she didn't see herself as a good math student. And I was like, what? But it just made me think like, well, I didn't ask her when she was in my class. So I just
Yeah.
had assumed things because she did well. I don't know. It just made me really reflect on I probably should have done more of those activities throughout the year, not just in the beginning and say we're done, but find out what they're thinking all along the way.
Yeah. It's so easy as a teacher to make assumptions about students and I think make assumptions like in it sounds like in both of our cases like I at one point did have the conversation and did ask them where they were at and I think I allowed that to be my guide for too long. Like
Yeah.
I made assumptions based off where they were at in that moment,
Mm-hmm.
rather than continually checking in with them and having those. I think it really just comes back to having those intentional conversations, like intentionally having a conversation about productive struggle. Um, and I think that this is another example of where we talk about like what we value, what do we carve out time for?
Yes.
Because it's very much like there's a little bit of that, oh, but the pacing guide or oh, but like the math block is only 60 minutes. And I think we have to kind of do like a little bit of a heart check of, okay, we can say that we value all of these things, but where are we carving out our time? I know a lot of times like financial advisors and stuff, they'll say like, I can tell what you value based on your budget.
Right.
And it's like, where do you spend your money? These are the things that you value, even if your words are saying you value something else. And I kind of think it's the same thing. It's like, can we look critically at the 60 minutes? And if we can't give up, 5 minutes once every 2 weeks to reflect on productive struggle, then do we really value productive struggle? And I say that with like the utmost grace and everything. Like this, I'm actually, I think, speaking to myself
Yeah.
in the sense that it is hard. It's hard when we have these outside pressures and we have outside expectations at war with the things that we truly do believe are so helpful for students, but we don't necessarily always feel like we have the space to prioritize those. So I don't know. That's a really awful way to end the book study. I just like ended the book study with this big wondering of like, okay, this is really hard. So let's like bring it back to like positive here.
Right.
Um,
Hopefully some teachers are reading it with other teachers at your school. I like that would be the best case, I think, if you're trying anything new, to have other teachers who are on board with when we're
yes.
planning, we're going to have some time, because it is hard. I know some teachers are probably reading this alone and feel like the other teachers at their schools maybe aren't going to do anything like that. And it's tough. It is really tough to say,
Yeah.
I'm going to try something a little different. And I'm not sure if anyone else is going to do it that I can discuss it with. But I mean, I think you just have to do the 10%. You just got to give it a shot, and then maybe others will see what you're seeing and want to learn more about it from you.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Like having that teaching partner, whether it's in your school or somebody in your district or even somebody online, there
Yeah.
are thousands of teachers who signed up for this book study who, I mean, they're look in the comments, see if you can, I know it can feel awkward, but see if you can find somebody who maybe teaches the same grade as you or doesn't even teach the same grade as you, just somebody you've connected with over the book study. And that can kind of be that little bit of accountability, or just like not even accountability, but like an encouraging partner to say like, okay, we're going to try this. It feels a little scary. It feels like it may be taking a little bit of time from the content or whatever else. But just to have that person to be a reminder that um, this is really powerful in the classroom. If you look at the NCTM effective teaching practices, I think facilitating or providing opportunities for productive struggle, isn't it one of the 8?
I think so.
I think it is. I'm like, I may have to like somebody fact checks me on that. I do know somewhere in NCTM that productive struggle is like one of the key things that is valued as far as like great math classrooms. So yeah, finding that person who can kind of support you when it feels uncomfortable and also celebrate you when you have those great things happening in your classroom. So if you don't have that person at your school, we can be that community for you. But I just thank y'all so much for giving up how was it, 5 weeks of your summer to join us for this book study, to read alongside us, to show up at the book chats. It has been a great time. And I know that I will probably get many questions about the PD certificate. So you will get an email that will have a like form for you to fill out. It will ask you about like the chapters that you've read and the book chats that you attended and things like that. So that you can fill that out and you will get your PD certificate emailed to you after that. So you should get that email in the next like 48 hours. And then I think that's it. If you want to keep learning, hang out in the Mix and Math community, follow the Mix and Math YouTube page. We'll be doing a few free workshops this summer, so you can sign up for any of those. But I'm just so glad to have you here. And Rachael, I am so glad that you joined me. This just felt like a family reunion. I can't remember the last time that we did a live stream together. I mean, I know we did one in 2019. I feel like we had to have done one in
There's been
2020.
more scattered in there. Yes.
Yes. But this was just so nice to get to chat with you. I know everybody can follow you, Rise Over Run, over on Instagram. Are you in any of the other places, website? Like, where can they connect with you?
Let's see. My website's riseoverrunteacher.com. I'm on TPT. I have a Facebook page. Just search Rise Over Run. I bet you'll find me.
Yes. I was going to say, if you teach middle school, you've got to follow Rachael. But honestly, if you just teach math, you've got to follow Rachael. Or if you're a parent of a student, follow Rachael. I just love the videos that you create. And I feel like we have our philosophies of math education aligned so beautifully. So thank you so much for joining me. It was so great chatting with you. Yes, and thank all of you. Thank you so much for joining me and all of the other guests for this book study. It was wonderful to get to learn alongside you. And I cannot wait to talk math with you all again soon.